Hello fellow cinephiles, 90s Film Guru here. Thanks for joining me today. For those who are new to the channel, my name's Sean, also known as the 90s Film Guru, and this channel is all about the 90s, everything 90s. Yet again, today is going to be a review of a film that isn't really set in the 90s and wasn't made then either, but it's just a film I wanted to talk about. It's a film I recently watched, and it's a film I've been thinking about and trying to work up the courage, I guess, in a way to watch because of the graphic nature of it. So today I'll be reviewing Terrifier2. It's directed by Damien Leone, and it's really carrying on the story of Art the Clown, a new creepy psychotic serial killer who doesn't speak but speaks through actions in volume. This is a film I've kept putting off and off and off due to, like I said, the subject matter. But then I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. Like a band-aid, just tear it off. Due to the fact I'm not a real big fan of really gory films, and that's funny going into this because of the fact it's a gory splatter film and that's what you should expect going in. I just don't love that sort of thing, but there are a lot of aspects to this movie I did enjoy. This time around it finds Art the Clown following and harassing Sienna and her brother. Sienna has lost her father, and it's really about how she's trying to come to terms with that. He was a really creative, artistic person, and she is as well, by you see her creating her costume for the Halloween party she's going to. And there's a real strong bond and connection with that. And there's a divide in the family because of the choices he made and what happened to him and how that's affected them. And it's really about Sienna going toe-to-toe with Art the Clown, all the while trying to keep her brother safe and ultimately put an end to this sadistic, psychotic clown. I felt this film added a lot of new aspects to it. There's a sort of a mythology to it in regards to a particular sword and who Art the Clown is and what all that sort of means. They don't go into too much depth with it, which they really could have, which would have been interesting. And there are aspects that they could have really devolved more into. But these parts were my favourite. I thought Lauren Lavera was really great in this. She played Sienna, our fearless leader, our final girl, and I thought she was great. She started her career as a stunt woman, and Damien takes full advantage of that, particularly this fight sequence that takes place within a toilet towards the end of the movie. It's really interestingly done, and her practicality and her skill as a stunt woman is really great and is put to really good use in this particular scene. But I think she's really the standout. In a lot of ways, this felt like Rob Zombie. Not his particular style, or even the gruesomeness of it was different, but there's just something about that, about what Zombie does and what Damien does is very similar. But it's also the fact that Rob Zombie started making these sort of gruesome slasher films, House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. But when he came to Halloween, he sort of took his time. He wanted to tell a story, he wanted to connect with the audience, he wanted to give you characters you kind of cared about, which you kind of do a little bit. And Damien does the same thing here, because we spend so much time with Sienna and her family, and we're really crafting interesting characters for us to kind of care about, and I thought that was really cool. It's like he's evolving as a filmmaker and a storyteller, and adding new things to these films that wasn't in the first one. Except for the gore, in a lot of ways I felt this film was a lot better than the first. Yes, the first one is very grounded and simple, but there's not the characters that you don't care too much for. But in this one you do a bit more than you usually would because he spends time crafting, creating them. The other aspects he adds to it is there is a sequence in a laundromat where Art's he needs to wash his clothes, so he puts them in the machine and he's just sitting there covered in blood, naked. And then this really weird, tiny little creepy girl appears who looks exactly like him, like his prosthetic and in his clown makeup. And a bond forms between them. But you're not quite sure if she's real or not because it seems Art's the only one who can really see her. But I thought this was really disturbingly funny. And I really liked what they did with this little character. The first Terrifier was small and contained and very simple, where this one broadens things a bit and makes for a far more interesting film and expands it, which is what should be done for a sequel, especially a horror film. It should continue on what you started in the first one, but it should expand into something bigger, and I think he does that here. As usual, Art the Clown is still a very creepy and unsettling character, and brutal at times, but still very funny, which is a conflicting emotion, I think. Yes, he's a psychotic, sadistic murderer, but he also has a level of humour to him, which you kind of like. It's really weird. There are a number of scenes, I mentioned the laundromat, that are really good. There's a scene in a prop sort of shop where Sienna's searching for wings for her Halloween costume, and Art appears, and the way he sort of jokes around but sort of intimidates her, and he's just constantly there giving her a hard time. Like he's picked her, you're my next victim, like he did in the first film. And then but everything he does is really creepy but slightly funny, and then the brutality comes out after she leaves with the attack on the store attendant, but also funny in something he does with a particular body part. While I did enjoy this film, I just felt the gore was a bit much. There were so many moments in it, I just felt like, did we really need this? There's one scene in particular in a house involving this girl. The whole sequence is so brutal, and it seems to go on and on and on, and I just felt it was a bit much. It made me feel a bit queasy. You might think I'm a bit soft with that, but it's just, gore isn't something I enjoy, and it messes with my head, and it makes me feel queasy and not wanting to eat. And this scene really did that. It just seemed to go on. It just felt like Damien's like, well, what's the most messed up thing we can do to a character? What's the most gruesome kill we can do? And that's what they do. And I just felt it was way too much. There is, however, a funny moment in that where after everything's transpired, Art opens the door to these little kids trick-or-treating, and there in his hands is a human head with candy in the top. I found this hilarious, which is really obscure and dark, but I found it very funny, and it lightened the moment quite a bit. And I can see why people walked out of this movie or felt ill, or it makes sense once you've seen the scene I'm talking about. The other issue I found with the film is it's just too long, nearly 2.5 hours. It didn't need to be that long. You could have cut half an hour of it and trimmed down certain scenes. It just felt like, oh, look what I can do. I've got money now and a bit of time, so let's expand it. And they did, but it just felt a bit too long in my opinion. There's storylines that Damien introduces, like I mentioned, a particular sword and the mythology around Art the Clown and the story itself, but they don't go into as much depth to it as they really could have. And they never really talk about the connection or what their father had to do with it all, or what he worked out, or what really transpired for him to do the things he did. It's only touched on, but I felt they should have expanded on this a lot more, since they did with the sword and they paid that off. There is a kind of a weird but funny nightmare where it's sort of like a kid's show, and there's a chick playing a banjo and all those kids singing about the clown cafe or the clown whatever that was. And I thought this was funny, and then Art appears like it's his own show, like he's the main character in his own show, and the Sienna character who's having a nightmare is sitting there dressed like the other characters, and then it just turns really brutal. He does some really horrific things in this scene, but there are some funny moments. He lights a particular character on fire, and they're still playing the banjo, which was hilarious. But it really sets up this idea like this is another realm. It's like, it's a dream, yes, but it's like all of these characters are dead and they're stuck in a purgatory kind of thing that they sort of look at a bit more later in the movie, especially towards the end. I think in a lot of ways, Art the Clown takes a back seat in this film. And we see a bit more of the effects of him here, but it just feels like it shifts into Sienna's movie. And I really like that though. I really like we have a final girl and we care about it, but it just shifts this into much more of a slasher type film. It's gory than others, but it feels like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, but he's sort of voiceless, like Jason and Michael are. It's sort of this idea where it's more about the characters that this killing machine goes after than the machine itself. And I think, yeah, he just takes a bit of a back seat here, but I guess they try and make that up with all the gore that happens in it. I do like the third act to the ending. I feel it's really interesting. It's where Sienna rises up and becomes the hero, and I like that. And I like the fight and the things that transpire between her and Art the Clown is really great. And she feels like such a great, wonderful hero. There's a scene where she rises out of a pit. I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen it, but this sequence is really great, and the way they address the sword is really cool as well. Now, I'm not going to try and give too much away with this part, but the film ultimately ends and the credits roll, and then we get another scene. And I know they did that with the first one to say, well, what happened to Arthur Clown? Is this the end for him? And then we have this other scene in a mental hospital, and it's just gruesome and violent for no reason. And I just felt this sequence ruined the ending for me, because we left on such a high, such a great moment. But we have to give more, and I just feel like we didn't really need it. And I think that was the most disappointing part of the movie, that tacked on ending. So once the credits roll, if you don't want to see after this particular scene, and I wish I didn't see it, it does end with the credits rolling, which is the best part, which is a much far better ending than what we... In the end, this film has a lot of elements that I really liked. It expands the story, it goes in a different direction. I felt more connected to the characters, especially Sienna in this, than I did the first film. And it just feels like he's evolving and growing this character and the environment the character is part of in a really interesting way. And I'm kind of intrigued to see what he does next. So in the end, I'm going to give Terrifier 3.5 out of 5. I gave it a bit more because of Sienna. It's a lower film for me. I'm not a huge fan of these movies. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.